So you'll notice here already the presentation is dating itself. This was intended to be at the Water Authority's Education Center in Hauppauge, but obviously with COVID, we're holding it just virtually. It's a presentation held jointly with myself. I'm Seth Wallach. I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator for the Suffolk County Water Authority. And I'm also here today representing the Long Island Commission for Aquifer Protection. Mike Dwyer, I'll let you introduce yourself in a little bit. Mike's with the Irrigation Association of New York. So just really quick, before we jump into water conservation and smart controllers, just a little bit about the Water Authority. For those who don't know, we are an independent public benefit corporation, which essentially means that we operate on a non-for-profit basis without taxing power. And we serve 1.2 million Suffolk County residents, which makes up about 85% of Suffolk County. One of the largest groundwater suppliers in the country. A little bit about us. We have over 600 wells, over 580 active wells at 240 locations countywide, 68 storage tanks that hold almost 72 million gallons of storage. Our average daily pumpage is 210 million gallons, but our average peak pumpage is 470 million gallons, which is a lot of what we want to cover today. Also, a little bit about LICAP, the Long Island Commission for Aquifer Protection. We're a bi-county agency. So LICAP is made up of water suppliers in Nassau and Suffolk. Both county executives have representatives on LICAP, in addition to both county legislatures, both county departments of health, and both county soil and water conservation districts. The New York State DEC and USGS both sit on LICAP as well. So it's really kind of an all-encompassing stakeholders organization to protect our aquifer on Long Island. So what we really want to talk about today is, why bother with water conservation, and we're going to lead that into why we should bother with smart controllers in a little bit. So Long Island has a sufficient supply of water in our aquifer, but that supply is not limitless. We still need to do what we can to protect it. And the more people use water, that means there's more of a strain on the Water Authority's infrastructure and the infrastructure of our counterparts in Nassau County as well. So when our costs go up, our customers' costs go up, and we don't like to see that happen either. Peak time usage between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m. When everyone uses water at the same time in the early morning, that can affect not only everyone's water pressure, their shower pressure, but it can affect fire protection as well. So that's something we want to make sure we're guarding against, that we always have enough in the system for proper fire protection. And of course, especially in coastal areas of Long Island, you don't want to overpump because that has the potential for some negative water quality impacts that we want to stay away from. So residential water use. The residential water user in the United States accounts for more than 9 billion gallons of water each day, and that's mainly for landscape irrigation. All this information is from the EPA. Their experts estimate that as much as 50% of that water is wasted due to overwatering, which is caused by inefficiencies in irrigation methods and systems. And that's why we wanted to talk to you folks today, the industry group who actually does the work. Irrigation control technologies can significantly reduce this overwatering, however, by applying water only when plants need it. And so in Suffolk County, for example, about 70% of all of the water we pump at SCWA is for outdoor purposes, such as lawn irrigation. Nearly 3/4 of our infrastructure are actually turned off in the winter because we don't need them. And I'll show you a graph that illustrates that in a little bit, so you can see how stark winter usage versus summer usage really is. And of course, increased demand means more infrastructure, as we've covered before. The average well for the Water Authority costs well over $1 million to install. So if we see, that a big increase in demand, it means more wells have to be constructed. It's costs going up for everybody. So speaking of that pumpage, I just wanted to give you an idea of seasonal pumpage in both counties. This data is from LICAP's most recent State of the Aquifer report. And you can see here the light blue bar is water use in what we call our off-season for pumping, October through April. And the dark blue bar is May through September, peak season pumping. So you can see in Nassau County, they're pumping almost twice as much water in peak season versus off-peak season. We've got the data here for the last 4 years. And in Suffolk, that disparity is actually even starker. You can see in some cases, it's actually almost triple. It's almost up to, 400 million gallons of water per day. This is another graph we like to use that just kind of illustrates the state of water pumpage and water pumpage by season. So on the left, you'll see this is in gallons per minute, up here at 100,000. This is what the Water Authority will typically pump on a winter day. You'll see that peak is right here. This is 5 a.m. in the morning. So this is what we'll typically pump on a winter day. This is what the Water Authority is pumping in the summer weekend versus summer weekday. And then what we'd like to point out is this light blue line right here. This is how much the Water Authority has to pump during the summer so that folks can water their lawns in the rain. So that's something we want to get away from. So how have we been encouraging our customers to help us out? Well, we've asked them to do a couple of things. We've asked them to avoid watering during peak times, during that 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. window. Mike's going to talk a little bit about a little later about what you can do to help them do that. We asked them to consider an odd, even watering schedule. Odd number of homes water on odd days, even number of homes water on even days. But most importantly, we're asking people to install smart controllers that use water more efficiently. And to help them do that, the Water Authority has offered them a $50 credit on their bill. So we use this slide to kind of illustrate the disparity in our average user versus one of our really high users. So the average residential user for us, our data has at about just under 130,000 gallons per year. Now the largest residential users, we had one user on the East End that used 22 million gallons in the last 5 years, or in 2018, and a hospital in that same year, in that same community, used 14.5 million gallons. So this one user on the East End to water their property was using more than Southampton Hospital. So that's something we definitely have to address. Which leads us to smart irrigation controllers. So studies by other water districts have shown that smart controllers save up to 20% of all water applied, as opposed to the traditional irrigation controller. And this is significant for us because on Long Island, like I said, 70% of that water ends up being outdoor use. The average Water Authority bill, for example, in Suffolk comes out to about $360 a year, meaning that if you're saving 20%, you're not going to save, the consumption isn't directly related to the cost. There are other fees and things of that nature, but you're going to save around that $70 a year just from your consumption, just from installing that smart controller. And if a smart controller is a couple of $100s, that's going to pay for itself in just a couple of years. We like to give folks that 50% off right off the bat so they can make that initial purchase to make that a little easier. But ultimately, it's going to pay for itself in water savings. That's the most important thing. So that's actually why we call this a win-win-win. So you've got customers who use smart irrigation to avoid overwatering. And when they do that, they're not only helping protect our aquifer, and they're not only helping keep our costs down, which keeps their costs down in turn, but they're saving money on their water bill every quarter. Smart controllers are easy to control from any internet-enabled device. It can be your phone, your tablet, your computer, and you could set it to water optimally. Or if you really want to, if you like your old watering schedule, you can actually keep using that schedule. It's very easy to program these on your phone. But we obviously want people to use optimal watering practices. As I mentioned earlier, the Water Authority offers that $50 credit for anyone who buys a smart controller, which is great. So if you've got any customers in Suffolk County that are interested in using a smart controller, or if you're installing smart controllers for your customers out in Suffolk, make sure they know about that rebate program. And after the meeting, I can provide anybody with some promotional information about that's easy to pass out. Make sure everyone is taking advantage of that $50 credit if they like it. We also offer a WaterWise checkup program. This is currently on hold due to COVID because it's an in-person consultation about your water bill and how to save, on what conservation strategies will work best for you. So obviously that's on hold due to COVID. We're not entering people's homes right now. But hopefully in a few months, when the pandemic is over, we're going to be restarting our WaterWise checkup program and doing some more home visits because that's been really successful so far. All the information that folks can use to sign up for both of these programs is right down here. They can email us, waterwisecheckup@scwa.com, or they can DM us on Facebook or Twitter, or call this dedicated phone number that's just for WaterWise programs right here. So the last thing I want to talk about before I hand it over to Mike Dwyer is the Our Water, Our Lives program. So Our Water, Our Lives, for those who don't know, is LICAP's comprehensive education program that wants to educate Long Islanders about the importance of water conservation. So as you can see, this is a photo of our kickoff right here. We've got, both county executives' offices involved. We've got Steve Ballone right here at the microphone. Deputy Nassau County Executive Brian Schneider was here. There's Mike, Adrian Esposito from Citizens Campaign for the Environment. We want to make sure, our environmental protection organizations are a part of this as well. So it's really an all-encompassing campaign. I encourage everybody to check out Our Water, Our Lives on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We've got a dedicated team on those social accounts putting out really great, just water-saving tips, water-saving content, and make it really easy. And go to ourwaterourlives.com. Take the pledge to save water. It's got great tips as well. And over 4,000 Long Islanders have taken that pledge so far at ourwaterourlives.com. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
Lucky me. Let me just make sure I have control of it. I have share screen. It's not going.
Should. I've stopped sharing mine.
I got it.
Yep.
Okay. Hello, my name's Mike Dwyer. I have what's called a CIC. I'm a certified irrigation contractor from the Irrigation Association, the irrigation.org. That's the National Association. I'm a board member of the IAMY, that's our website right there, IAMY.org. It's a wonderful license to have, and it's hard to do. Reducing the impact of irrigation on water supply infrastructure, that's what we're here about. When Seth and I were first talking about this, I asked for a few numbers to come to me. And when he sent me the data, which he's already shown you, I saw where we could help him. And that's kind of why we switched this up from just a smart controller to hitting a couple other topics, which will help reduce the impact of the irrigation industry on their water supply infrastructure. How can we help? Easiest thing is probably altering start times right now. If you saw his slide, their biggest demand is between 4 and 7 a.m. So that's generally, as most systems in my eyes should be shutting down and people should be starting to shower. So we're going to try and see if we can find a way to help that. Install or test an existing rain sensor. There's nothing more frustrating as an irrigation professional than for me to be driving around on a rainy day and see sprinkler systems running in the pouring rain. It's probably one of the most wasteful and hurtful things in my eyes to the irrigation industry. Check head spacing. Well, a lot of sprinkler heads, they've been in a while. The landscape has grown, it's changed. People have made additions, they've made subtractions. Did they really stay in and make sure that the head spacing stayed correctly for the heads that were in place? A lot of times they're not, so we're running things for longer to try and pick up the weakest spot in the system. We're wasting more water. You need to check that head spacing and keep it as accurate as you possibly can. Check heads for matched precipitation nozzles. That's probably the one when it comes to rotary heads that we see the biggest mistakes on. A lot of guys buy cases of heads that already have a nozzle installed in it, and that's what they use for the whole zone. And that zone may have a quarter head on it, a half head on it, a full head on it, and they're still trying to water them at the same rate. If you do it that way, the quarter nozzle is going to way overwater its area. The half nozzle is probably going to be right on the spot, and then the one that you're running full is going to get the least amount of water. And generally, if you're trying to water a full area, that's the one you're trying to get the most amount of water on. So check nozzle, make sure they're proportional to what their rotation is on the zone, and let's get some match precipitation there. It will help reduce wasted water, which is what this is all about. When you're doing your layouts, separate your lawn from your shrubs, separate your shrubs from your flower areas. All these things have different watering requirements. It's very important to water them individually so that you're applying the right amount of irrigation for what that area needs. Plus, if somebody adds some flowers and they want to water them in, you're not watering the shrubs, you're not watering the lawn, wasting water on that when you just want to water the flower area. And then, of course, the best thing in this market that's hit us in a while is smart controller technologies. They're really here to help us. And we're talking about going back to altering the start times. I want you to, as a person working in this area, how many clients do you have in Suffolk County Water Authority? Divide that number in half if you got an odd and even, or water every 2 days. What do you think the impact would be in that section if they all came on at the same time? It's kind of ridiculous. It's like us all trying to get on the LIE at one exit at 3 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's a nightmare. Let's move that around so that we can help them. Spread out your start times. This is what I'm proposing. It's just an idea. You can choose whatever you want for your own, but come up with a strategy within your own company. We're going to try and reduce the impact of our systems when they're running. Now, we always get arguments from the landscapers. We want it done so we can get out there and mow the lawn in the morning when we're legally allowed. We got the homeowner who doesn't want the system running while they're trying to get in the shower. So let's just find a time and break it up. So what I was proposing is maybe start houses that end with 0, 1, and 2 at midnight. If the last digit is a 3, 4, 5, start at 1. If it ends 6, 7, 8, 9, start at 2 a.m. Just come up with something. Don't choose one time. I'm very guilty of doing that. If you're a client of mine and you don't have a preferred start time, I'm starting you at 2 a.m. That's my go-to rule. I've been doing this a long time. It's kind of ingrained in me. So I'm going to have to start finding a way to help my brothers who are supplying the product that I like to use to make my customers happy. Rainfall. That's our helper. That's our friend. That's something that we are making up for when it's not there. So we want to try and make sure that when it does fall, that we are not going to waste the product. We're going to hold the product back and wait until the landscape needs it. Most of the time, we all think rain falls straight down. But a lot of times, we usually have some winds. So it's usually coming a little bit from one side or the other side. And why am I bothering to show that? Because if you're going to put a rain sensor in, you got to look for an umbrella. I mean, out there, if you don't want to get wet, you put an umbrella on. And I see a lot of people put rain sensors when there's an umbrella right above it. And what do I mean by an umbrella? It's anything that covers or obstructs rain from getting to a rain sensor. Over the years, I've heard a lot of strange things about rain sensors. People kind of seem to think that there's a little man sitting in there looking out an observation window and sees if it's raining, and if he sees it's raining, he shuts it off. That's not how it works. It's got a little disc system in there that has to get wet, swell up, and then it's going to shut it off. So if we're going to put one in, we got to put it where the water can get to it. Things that like to obstruct us from doing that are chimneys. I've seen them mounted right on the side of a chimney 5 feet up. The chimney's 25 feet tall. What do you think the odds are of the rain actually getting down there? I've seen them under roof overhangs. A lot of good they're going to do there because they got the overhang. Guess where I run when it's raining? To the side of the house, next to the chimney, under the roof overhang. There's no way in heck I'm getting wet. Tall buildings. Sometimes you've got a tall building right next to the building you're working on. If that rain is coming from a sideways direction between your rain sensor and that building, it's not going to get there. It's going to be blocking it again. And then the one that you see all the time is you look straight up and you see a tree branch. I always say when it comes to rain sensor, it's location, location, location. But take the time before you decide where to put it and look up. If you can see clear sky and you can see it pretty much 360 degrees around, you got a good place to put a rain sensor. Right here is where I find them all the time, right underneath the tree, right on the edge of the overhang, because why the heck do I want to put it somewhere else? You have to be conscious. Try and look for an area that's outside the edge at the roof height so that it can get a chance to get rain. Now you really can't see it well on this picture, but that's a rain sensor right there, and you can see it's clearly under an overhang. I was at a doctor's office, and this was another one I saw. This was winter time, and down here you can see his PVB because there's a doctor's office. Not a pressure vacuum breaker, I'm sorry. And RPZ was dumping water. So probably needs to have that tested and repaired too. But here's the rain sensor right below the window, right below the roof line. What are the odds that's ever going to work? Where do you want to put a rain sensor? As I previously stated, install at a roof line. But all our manufacturers have come out with these fantastic wireless rain sensors, battery operated, can let me go generally between 200 and 300 feet from its source, and I can install it on a fence. Why would I want to install on a fence? It's easy to get to. I can test it. I can make sure it's working. If I put it up on a gutter, which is very good too, but don't put it inside the gutter. Some people don't want to see things and they ask them to be put inside the gutter. If the gutter gets clogged, it's going to back up. That rain sensor is never going to dry out, and that system is never going to come on, and guess who's in trouble? I've placed them on storage sheds. People don't mind. Usually they're in the backyard. They're away from everything, and you can put it on the back of the storage shed once again where you can reach it. Why do I want to reach it? I want to test it. I want to make sure it's working, and if it needs replacement, I don't have to go grab the ladder out of the truck and find a bunch of excuses. They're real simple to change. Now, why would you want to use a rain sensor? I'm just going to give you a typical house. This is an assumed thing that they have 5 zones of rotors. You have 3 zones of mist. This is high season. This is what most people are going to run it when we get into the summertime, which around here our hottest, driest month is usually July. So there's 5 zones of rotors running for 45 minutes. That's 255 minutes of runtime. And then 3 zones of mist at max time for the summer. That's 45 minutes. 270 minutes of runtime. That's 4.5 hours. Average volume of water used on the zone is 10 gallons per minute. That's 2,700 gallons per cycle summertime. That's a lot of water, but it's what's necessary. Number of rainy days in the sprinkler season. Let's say 30 days. Generally, we're watering odd and even or every other 2 days. So probably not going to water every day I decide to water. So we're going to take 15 days. So let's take 15 days. We're going to take 2,700 gallons of water, and it's 40,500 gallons of water I would save with a functioning rain sensor on just a typical system that is put on one setting at the beginning of the spring and left that way until I show up to winterize that system at the end of the year. That's a significant impact with a relatively small, simple device to install. How much water do you need? That's always the question. That's an existential one for most of us sprinklermen. This is the climate data for Hauppauge. We were supposed to have this in Hauppauge as we talked about. So this is trying to show us how much water we would need for our program, figuring July is what I programmed it for a typical year. This is historical data runtime. So you can see, obviously, we don't water around here in the early months, but anywhere from March, April, we're starting to get systems on. May, we're starting to get drier. June, even drier. July and August are usually hot and dry, but not much, if you can see that. And then September, October. The problem is, when you look at these first couple of areas here, most people, when they turn their system on, we're watering at this 100% here, instead of watering only 43%, because it's cooler weather, we're having rain, we're having things that are making up the water needs for the landscape. We don't need the irrigation to be running at 100%. So there are ways around this. But first, I'm just going to show you, if we do the math, how much water we're going to use. At 61% of the 2,700, watering every 2 days, here's the gallonage. So we're going to break that down. So that's 234 gallons, almost 235, 234, 100. So that's at 100% use. This is what it's going to add up for 8 months of use if we're running it at 100% all the time. So April to November, that's $324,000 gallons, sorry. And if we use seasonally adjusted, which was the math we used, and we showed the percentage we should be watering, we're going to use only 234,000 gallons. That's going to save us almost 90,000 gallons of water. And guess what? If there was a rain sensor on that, we would save much more. What's the problem with it? It sounds great, doesn't it? That requires monthly adjustment of the run cycles. So that's either the customer is doing it or your customer is paying you to come by monthly, check their system, and make adjustments to the clock. We don't have too many customers that want to do that. To save time and had to have time and money to save the water. Is there an easier way? Well, Seth already alluded to that, but I'm going to say it. Here's the big surprise: smart controllers. Smart controllers are one of the best things that has hit this market to allow us to help reduce the wasted water. Wasted water is putting more on the landscape than the landscape can use. So smart controllers are where we're going to go. We have 2 types of smart controllers. We have location-based. Seth, it changed. It didn't stay at the ET sensor like we thought. Location-based, that at should say ET. ET is a term that we use in the irrigation business. It stands for evapotranspiration rate. Basically, it's how we determine how much water the plant would have needed for a given time frame, usually a daily. And that sensor, with a little bit of algorithm built into the clock, will determine how much of that 100% that we set for the July month. It will determine how much of that we would need on a lesser month. It's responding to the weather. It's responding to the trend, what's going on. What's good about this? It's not tied into the internet. It is strictly based at the location of where you installed it. You don't have to have an internet connection to make this happen. So if somebody has a weekend home where they don't have internet there and they just want to have a way to control their water use, there are 2 manufacturers out there that have ET-based sensors that will work with their proprietary clock and will do a wonderful job with saving water for the people. The only thing with any sensor, must be located in the proper location. Should be south facing, should be getting anywhere from 6 to 8 hours of sun. Once again, look for umbrellas. It's like a rain sensor too. We don't want anything obstructing sunlight or rain from getting to it. And the one that is out there that most people are talking about today are the cloud-based or web-based smart controllers. Those are the ones that Seth alluded to, one that you can operate from a smartphone or make changes from your desktop. And one of the biggest problems I found when I first started using smart controllers was trying to figure out how to get a Wi-Fi signal, or what was a good Wi-Fi signal that I could get a clock to go online with easy. This is a thing that's available at the app stores, Airport Utility. It's a wonderful way to test the Wi-Fi signal where the existing clock is or where you're planning to install a new clock, to make sure you have a good signal before you try and put in a Wi-Fi controller, before you get into frustrations with you and your customer. And if you really want to see how to use a Wi-Fi controller, I know this is going to be brand specific for what I'm going to show, but it's the one that I know that's out there. It's easy for people to see. And that's, if you go to stage here, if you go to this web channel and you go to the Wi-Fi for Green Industry Professionals, they will talk you through using this app, explain the fundamentals of what a Wi-Fi signal is. I was very ignorant of it and watched this about 3 or 4 times before I got the full gist of it. And now when I use this to check my signals and make sure what I have, I know I'm not going to have any problems installing that controller and having a happy customer and a less frustrating day for me. There are very big advantages to smart controllers. Well, if you're using an ET-based controller, mount it outside so you don't have to get into the house. If you're using a cloud-based, it doesn't matter where you're located, as long as you can get a signal to it. Remote programming, as we said, we're talking about these web-based controllers. You can remote program them, you can off-site monitor them, you can catch problems earlier, you can respond to customers faster. Now there is, from one of the manufacturers, they do have the ability for the ET-based sensor to be able to reach it from a remote location with another add-on to their existing system. Remote programming. Why would I want that? Well, anybody that's been in the irrigation industries long enough has known you go to a customer, you turn them on, you do an alteration, you do whatever, you leave there. The phone tends to ring 2 days later and say the landscaper showed up, planted bushes, planted something, put seed down, put sod down, whatever. Now you have to try and fit into your busy schedule to go back there and change the programming for what the customer had done. Well, guess what? I just pick up my app now, I turn it on, I make the change. The customer's happy, my time is saved. I'm probably going to charge them for it unless I didn't build any fees in for these kind of things. But there's a way to make your customer happy. If you make your customer happy, you're going to keep them around. Off-site monitoring. What did I mean by that? Well, with off-site monitoring, these clocks can give you feedback if you're having a problem electrically. If you want to go with more advanced features on it, you can also have flow sensing on these. It will monitor how much water a zone is using. Is the zone using too much water? Is the zone using zero water because the valve is not mechanically opening, but electrically opening? So I didn't get an alert that my valve was electrically functioning, but it didn't mechanically opening. Well, if I have a flow sensor on there, I will get an alert that tells me that that zone is supposed to use X amount of gallons, did not use that percentage, and now I have an issue. So I know it's a problem. My customer probably knows it's a problem. We're both going to be contacting each other. I'm going to be putting them in the service loop faster. I'm going to get there, and everybody's going to be much happier because the landscape is going to look healthy and happy. Now, saving water. That's really what all these are about. We're trying not to put more on the ground than what can be used. Because this system is constantly changing based on the weather, how hot it was, how cool it was it windy, was it not windy, did we have rain, did we not have enough rain? These things will all take that into account. Now, how much rain fell is probably one of the ones that I really found is very big and very helpful for a lot of us and reducing a lot of water use. Usually in the springtime, sometimes we will get the fast rain, which is drop a quarter inch and go away and really not even do much. Or we'll get one of those nice deep soaking rains where we could be getting an inch and a half of rain on the property. But most rain sensors don't know how much rain fell. They just know enough rain fell to shut them off. Well, because we are web-based, because we are tied into the rain sensors, the weather service, we now know how much rain fell in that area. My clock will now put that into the calculation and hold back any watering until I have used up that amount of rain that fell. And then the landscape will start to be irrigated when it's necessary. I had some systems off last year because of the way we were having rains. It was a week and a half before they started watering. It was tremendous. If I just had a rain sensor on it, it could be dry in 12, 20 hours, depending on if it was near the shore with the winds. It would be dried out and watering again. These are tremendously helpful. A lot of times when you go out and you look at a landscape plant that looks dying, people keep wanting to turn up the water. Most of the time you go there, you take your hand, you stick it in the ground, and you got nothing but mud. Too much water is just as damaging as too little water. We've got to look out for it. These things are tools to help us, help the landscape look healthy and be well. Maximizing the benefits of these controllers. They have a lot of functions in them. They are wonderful. But if you're going to use them, rotate the areas that you're irrigating. Most of the time when I first started in this business, I would start at the curb line and I would have the first row of heads down at the curb line watering up to the middle of the lawn. I'd have that runs first. Then I would go to the second one, which was right in the middle, and that would water the rest up to the top of the house and down to the curb again, watering where I already put water. That's not really good because I probably filled up a lot of that pore space, that area where that water could have went down into the ground. And now it was probably running down to the gutter and being wasted water. So what we want you to do, we want you to move around where you irrigate. If I'm going to do it now, I'm probably going to water that middle one first. And after I finish that zone, I'm going to go into the backyard somewhere. And in that backyard, I'll water another section that's probably in the middle back there. And then I'll come back to the front and I'll water maybe the lower one. So now I've let that water soak in some before I put more water on it. It's got a place to go. The ground could absorb it. The ground can use it. Another way of benefiting that and helping that go even better is use the cycle and soak feature. Cycle and soak is a great little addition they have in a lot of these controllers. And what that means is if I need to run 45 minutes, and I know if I run that water for more than 15 minutes, that ground is not going to take it in anymore, then that's where I'm going to want to stop it. So I'm going to let it run for 15 minutes. I'm going to tell it, hey, I need a break right now. I'm going to go somewhere else, water somewhere else, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to put some more water on it when that ground can take in a little bit more of that water. Once again, we're trying to give it a time to soak in. We want that water to go into the ground, not run off the surface of the ground, go down to the gutter, go down the drain, wasted water. We're trying to save water and use it efficiently. Use a rain sensor. Now, most of these smart controllers, the web-based ones, you can use anticipation of rain. You can set a percentage. If there's going to be an 80%, a 90%, a 100% chance of rain, then I want that sensor to shut off, that clock to shut off in anticipation of the rain. I personally, not a huge fan because my customers might be a little bit too far behind on that function. So I usually use a rain sensor. And I will let that system try to run and I'll let the rain sensor shut it off. If you have a mature landscape, you don't have any annuals on it, you don't have anything newly planted, then I would just let the clock do everything it wants to do. I wouldn't even let that rain sensor function use. I would let the anticipation shut it off because that system is going to have deep roots, well rooted out stuff. It's going to really be able to save the maximum amount of water. And if we have a mature place, let's save some water. Use heads with check valves in them. What's a check valve? Check valve is a way to keep water from draining out of the lowest head in a zone. Most of our properties are not level. There's always a 1 to 2 foot, 3 foot drop between one section and another section. When that system shuts off and those heads retract into the ground, you'll always see one head, the lowest one, where the water will be just gurgling out of it for anywhere from 10, 15 minutes. And usually that water, because the ground is soaked there, will now run over the curb and run down to the gutter, wasted water. If you use head check valves in the heads, it's going to stop that. It's also going to reduce that hissing noise when that zone starts to come back on in the morning, because we didn't drain that water out of it. We didn't let air get in there that we now have to evacuate all that air out with water, and you won't hear all that hissing noise. It's a lot more comfortable for the neighbors. And we've mentioned it before. I mentioned it, flow sensing. There's a couple of different ways of using flow sensing out there. There's water meter and there's paddle wheels. Both have their pluses and minuses of which one you want to use. I don't want to get into that because that's between brands, that could be a real fight starter. But flow sensing, it's great for big systems, systems that run at night. It's good for commercial properties because you're not there to generally see these things running. So with flow sensing, we're going to know if we have a zone that, once again, didn't run, or whether we had a zone that is using way more water because we have a line break somewhere, a broken head somewhere. We're going to be able to know it happened in real time, and we're going to be able to get out there and get it fixed before it causes a problem to our customer. One of the newest things that you're seeing around the country is pressure regulated bodies. Now, what do I mean by that? We've been using pressure regulated pop-up heads for years. They are rated between 30 pounds and 40 pounds. That's a rough estimate. And those are generally, 30s are usually for the spray heads. And we have these wonderful, very efficient things we've been using lately, which are the rotating nozzle systems. And they're ones that kind of look like a spider walking across the lawn. These things are very efficient in applying water, but we need a pressure regulated body so that every head applies the proportional amount of water. When we get into rotor heads, most of the time we haven't had these pressure regulated bodies. And what would happen is you start from one end of a zone to another end of the zone. If we just did it straight line, we have more pressure at the first head and less pressure at the last head in the line if, once again, we ran them in a straight line. So what a pressure regulated body does is when it gets to that first head, it only allows the amount of pressure that we need for that nozzle to optimally operate. And why do we want to operate optimally? We want to put down as close as we can to what that manufacturer has worked so hard to make that nozzle the most efficient at. Most rotor heads are between, we're going to say between 40 and 60 pounds on the residential side, just to keep it universal. Their pressure body for their brand of head is going to be right at what they want for optimal. So if I had 50 pounds hitting that first head and I only needed 40, I'm going to have more pressure getting to the second head. And it's going to be the same at the second head. And I may end up at the end, if I've done all my math right and ran my water, that I'm going to have 40 pounds at the first head and the last head. And guess what? My application rate of water, my distribution uniformity from the first head to the last is almost identical. And that means I'm not going to have to run that zone any longer than I need to because everybody on that line agreed and applied the appropriate amount of water correctly. Well, anytime you get something new, like a smart control, there's always frustration. There's always a learning curve. And that app is a great thing to make your life a lot easier if you're going to be using the web-enabled ones, because it's going to make sure you can get that customer online and without a problem. And if you're going to start getting the smart controllers, stick with one brand, please, while you're learning. Once you start getting the hang of them, you can expand out to other clocks. We also found that a lot when we were first starting to move from mechanical clocks back in the late 70s. Well, I didn't get in the business till the 80s. But as we started transitioning to digital, we found certain brands program one way versus another, and it was very frustrating. And so if you're going to get in and stick with one, learn it before you move on to others. When you're getting to start the programming these, find out if a friend of yours uses that brand, because a 2-minute conversation with your friend without having to go and bother our wonderful reps that rep the product lines around here is a lot easier usually to get him to pick up the phone in the high season to answer that one question, just to make it easier for you and your customer to have a wonderful experience with these fantastic smart controllers. But start using it on your own house so you can explain the controller to end users. There's a lot of technology in there. There's a lot of jargon we use in this, and you're probably going to send your customers' heads spinning. So you just need to teach them really the basics of how to turn it on, how to turn it off, and to try and get them not to play with it. Let the controller do the work. I don't need them to keep turning that system on to show their friends every time a new guy comes into the house. It is a nice thing. It's not a toy. It's a tool. Tools are not to be played with. They're to be used to do serious work. And I'm sorry, in the irrigation world, I'm about serious work. And when you put these in, if you start getting a brown spot on your lawn, that's usually a sales opportunity. That's not the clock's fault. That's usually what we were talking to about earlier. Somebody did not do their due diligence when they were either spacing out their heads or changing or setting their nozzles into those zones in those rotor heads. They weren't doing things properly. Brown spots are usually mismatched nozzles or misplaced heads. That's not usually the controller's fault. If you get a brown spot in a little area and the whole rest of the area is green, that's a problem with something other than the controller. If that whole zone that's running is brown, then you probably have an issue with your runtime, assuming that you had the flow sensor on and you also had no issues or reports in your electrical notice that there was a problem with that clock. To me, when I walk a system, the first time I see it, nozzles are the first thing I'm looking for. And I'll walk right through with the customer, generally on that turn on or that turn off, and go, hey, in the middle of summer, is this area over here always brown? Is this area over here always brown? And most of the time, their head is just wondering how the heck I could see it. Once you start learning your nozzles and you learn what they look like, and you can see that there's a difference in them, you kind of know the guy probably did his due diligence. But if you see a quarter nozzle running and a half nozzle on the same zone running, and they look like they're spraying the same amount of water, you got somebody that didn't take the time to do their job right. So I don't think brown spots are frustrations, but you have to tell your customer some things are going to happen. We may have to upgrade some other stuff on the system other than just the clock. I covered a lot of ground. I'm sure there's some questions out there. I know I've got some reps on the line. Hopefully I covered all topics for you. Seth, I think I'm going back to you. I hit the escape.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I mean, so does anyone have any questions for us? I know we've got a lot of industry folks on the line. Anyone going to be installing some smart irrigation controllers for their customers anytime soon? You know, we wanted to have this pretty much right before the busy season started, you know, late February. All right, well, if we don't hear anything, Mike and I will stick around for about the next 10 minutes or so in case anybody comes up with anything. But in the meantime, thanks so much, everyone, for attending, for coming out.
What's happening there, Ken?
Oh, it looks like
you got to turn your mute off there, Ken. Oh, I see it. I see somebody hit something.
Yep. It looks like Eddie has his hand up. I'm going to see.
How are you, Mike?
Pretty good, Ken. Good seeing you.
I was going to ask, can we share this presentation?
Heck yeah.
Yes, absolutely. You sure can. I'm going to make this PowerPoint available on the Water Authority's website just about when we leave this meeting. So just give me, 10 minutes after we end. And if you go to scwa.com, we'll have this PowerPoint available to download, and you can distribute it as you see fit. Yep.
I see Eddie's got a question. What's he got? You got on mute though, Eddie.
I already asked the question. It was if I could share the presentation.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
you.
I didn't know which person asked that. Bobby, you got anything to add up there? You're muted.
All right, how about that, Michael?
Beautiful.
All right. One point I wanted to make. Now I'm sure the water company's got this issue, where the newer controllers, everybody's got a smartphone, everybody's time is correct. Everybody's setting their clocks, like you said, 2 a.m. So exactly at 2 a.m., every clock is set by everybody's phone, which is accurate. Every clock is now accurate. 2 a.m. comes and bam, the water pressure just drops like a rock. Good practice that I usually do is I usually set the clocks for, I cheat a little bit, 5 minutes ahead. just to give, my clients a little bit more pressure at that 2 a.m. or 5 a.m. or whatever the start time is. And I'm also, giving them a little edge, but I'm also saving the dramatic drop in pressure at the time that most controllers go on, because they all are set pretty much at the same times now. So that's something I think I just wanted to add.
Yeah, well, that's kind of why I was suggesting to start changing your start times. I mean, the nice thing about Suffolk County is they don't have the same rules that we have in Nassau County. So there is much wider availability of use times for the irrigation to happen. And if you're using drip irrigation, if you're doing beds, if you're doing shrub areas, you can water them at other times that are less impactful in the whole system. Especially with a smart, we can set them up on a different program so that they are not doing their use during the hard time of the system when they're having the peak pumpage. So these things are wonderful tools for us to help.
Legislator Krupski, did you have a question for us?
I just want to thank you. That was a really good, a very informative presentation, and we will be passing that along. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
Any chance of getting a rain sensor law out there or something? Just something to assist?
No, that's what we're thinking here. Absolutely, because knowing what the the water providers are faced with, and sort of in an unregulated world, and it was different. 20 years out here, 30 years ago out here, nobody had lawn sprinklers. And so obviously it's a changing world, and you have to react to that. So absolutely, thank you. That's part of the conversation.
Yeah, I hate to use the line, but it takes a village now. I mean, when you start thinking about your personal impact as a business in one location, it starts to add up. And we weren't even talking, as I think I said in the presentation. I asked Seth for some information. When he got it back to me, I said, "Oh, we just can't do smart controllers. I got to go into some other nuts and bolts, because their impact is way different than what I run into in Nassau County. I've been helping the guys in Nassau County, and this is a different animal out here." Oh, Mr. Art Elmer's jumping on. Must have finished. But thank you. Appreciate that.
Oh, well done.
So I just want to go back to something actually that Bobby, you had mentioned a couple of minutes ago. You had said that you noticed that that drop in pressure at around 2 a.m. Was that right?
Or whatever, whatever times you got. I know I spoke to somebody, and they had told me that they can tell what time it is just by the pressure drop when they're sitting behind their computer or whatever from working at the water company. They can tell by the time.
Gotcha.
Just pressure drop without looking at their watch.
Okay. Because I know, I mean, I'm sure this does probably vary regionally a bit. I know what we've been saying at the Water Authority is, if people can, try to avoid 3 to 7. That's like our big peak, 3 to 7 a.m. I think on this graph, what does it say right here? 5 a.m. in the summer. That's when we get that big spike.
Well, I'd say over the years, for me getting into water districts, going and see, I could see their pump levels, their tank levels. And, they're like, I could tell you when the sprinkler systems go on, because all the alarms start going off July and August during the heat waves, because the tanks start dropping so fast. So if we can start watering proportionally and correctly, we're not going to have that happening like it should, because we're already going to be having the proper amount of water in the ground. We're not going to just keep cranking things up to try and solve a problem, a brown spot. That's really what we find a lot of things is people don't turn up one thing, they turn up everything. And they don't try and see if it's a problem. They don't want to make a phone call. They just want to change the clock.
Mike,
Yes, Ken.
how about if we start at 9 o'clock at night?
That's fine. We do run into issues sometimes with the landscape gardeners not being happy with that, because water is sitting on the ground too long overnight, that they might start getting fungus problems.
Oh, okay.
So we kind of run into, we're like really threading the needle every time we do something.
I hear you.
And Mike, I'm glad you answered that question. I mean, from the Water Authority's perspective, 9 p.m. works for us, but that's a good point. We've got to worry about, the landscapers as well. And then their
Well, also people using their yards. There's one in Nassau County that because of, prepping everything, they gave us zones of where we could water certain windows. And, one of them started at 9 p.m. at night. And that particular area has a bunch of rental properties. And you're telling the people who are renting that they can't use their yard because you're irrigating at that time. So I got that time pushed back a little bit more so I can stay out of the backyard until 11 o'clock so that they can get some use out of the yard.
Mike, can I jump in for a second?
Absolutely, Rich, please do.
Yeah, great presentation, number one.
Thank you.
I would just say that, one of the issues is the landscaping industry. They love to landscape. They love to put in all kinds of plants. A lot of the plants are not indigenous plants, and they need more water. I think that, if the overall end game is to save water, I think you need to take a hard look at how people landscape, and they should really consider plants that don't need a lot of water. The other thing is, we're on site to turn the system on, shut it off in the fall, maybe once or twice we're back to do repairs. We're not always in control of the watering or have access to the controller. I mean, smart controllers help tremendously, but landscapers like to water and they like to overwater. And I think that some effort needs to be made to reach out to them to get them not to not landscape, but just to think differently about this issue of saving water.
And so that's actually one of the things that we'll be looking into in the coming months. I know Mike and I wanted to have this discussion with irrigation professionals, but to your point, Rich, it's a discussion that needs to be had with landscaping professionals as well. So we're going to be reaching out to those industry groups as well over the next couple of months.
Great.
Mike?
Yes.
This is Art Elmers. I just want to take a step back to that question about 9 p.m.
Yep.
You are right. The traditional irrigation system could have some issues at 9 p.m. But what I would suggest is perhaps thinking about those that have drip, or maybe even the drip section of their irrigation systems, be allowed to operate down until 9 p.m. if you want to try to shed the load a little bit, because it makes no difference as far as disease problems because we're not putting it on the leaves, on the foliage.
Yeah. Well, actually, I know you were just finishing up your other thing. I kind of covered that in my presentation, that flowers and shrubs should be treated differently, but I did not mention the wonderful product of inline drippers. So that was my mistake.
Certainly, but it doesn't matter. Anybody's drip, anything that's not applying water onto the foliage basically can run any time of the day. Doesn't disease problems are not an issue.
Yeah,
so
we're not wetting leaves.
Right.
Michael, can I step in here for a second while we have a lot of people's attention?
Please do, Bobby.
As you know, IAMY, we're here to help legislators and water purveyors make these codes and to help save water. We're here to help. We're here to advise. Like Mike said, he had to step in. Some water purveyors made some decisions on codes and timing and stuff. We're here to help you guys, and I see it, and I'd like to see, Suffolk County made some comments on how long to water and stuff like that. Every property is different, and, your clients should be basically consulting a certified irrigation contractor. There's so many contractors that are out there that unfortunately in our industry have no clue of what to suggest. and especially in Long Island, Suffolk County, there's so many different variations of soils. One time does not fit every property. Again, pitch, runoff, soil conditions, it's all to particular landscape property. So I would love to see people or suppliers, water suppliers, suggest that they consult a certified irrigation contractor when choosing their timeframes, rather than giving them an example of how long to water, because sometimes those watering times are way too high.
I see Rich has his hand up. Rich, did you have something?
Yeah, I already, yes, I already spoke.
Okay.
Thank you. Gotta go. That was excellent presentation. Thank you.
Be well.
All right. Anyone else? If not, we're going to wrap up. But thank you so much, everyone, for coming on. We really appreciate it and giving us your time today.
Nice job,
Thank you.
guys.
Thank you.
Great job, everyone.
Very interesting.
And like I said earlier, so this PowerPoint presentation, as well as a video of this Teams call, so you can hear myself and Mike Dwyer present, will be available as well for distribution online. So we'll get that out
Sorry,
to everybody.
people have to listen to it again.
All right, take care, everyone.
Nice job, guys.
So long.